This is going to be one of those stories that sticks with you. A story about how a worn-out waitress with a broom handle ended up taking down a monster that no one else dared to look in the eye. It all started on a Tuesday afternoon at the Crossroads Grill, a place where the coffee is always black. The air smells like bacon grease, and life just kind of moves slow. I'm Eleanor Vance, but everyone calls me Ellie. I was wiping down the counter, listening to the rumbling low-frequency hum of the Iron Will MC Geisgrim tank and Slick in their usual booth. They're big, scary-looking men, but decent, you know? They never caused trouble, just drank their coffee and talked about the road. And then the door chimed. But this wasn't a chime. It was a crash. This little girl, maybe 10 years old, hair flying, eyes wide and filling up the whole world, she flew through that door and slammed right into my apron. She didn't look at me. She just clung. Her fingers digging in like I was the last tree on a cliff edge. She just whispered, "Ma'am, please help me. He's coming." My heart hammered not because of the volume, but because of the sheer animal terror in her voice. I knelt down instinctively. "What's your name, honey?" "Who's coming?" She could barely breathe, shaking like a leaf. Maya Rose Sterling, she managed to gasp out. And then she said, "Dr. Thorne, he said I was lying. He's not my dad. He's not anything." I didn't even have time to process the name before the door swung open again. And I mean swung open like he owned the entire highway leading up to it. In walked Dr. Silas Thorne. Perfect khakis, navy polo, salt and pepper hair perfectly styled. The kind of man who looks like he lives in a magazine, radiating this slick, practiced calm. The kind of person who's never had a bad day, or at least never showed it. He smiled a wide, empty thing that didn't reach his eyes, and said, "There you are, sweetheart. You scared me half to death." He looked at me, this calm shifting instantly to condescension. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Maya has these episodes. I'm her school counselor at Maple Ridge Elementary, Dr. Silas Thorne. Temporary guardian. All legal." He reached for her, and that was when my blood went cold. The moment that little girl flinched, I knew. I've been the help, the maid, the background noise for 50 years, and I know a practiced mask when I see one. I straightened up, putting my body between his pristine polo shirt and this terrified child. "She says you're not her family," I told him, my voice low. "And around here, that matters." Thorne's smile tightened, just a fraction. He pulled out the usual script. No papers, no ID. It was Tank's voice, the biker slow, gravelly, suddenly right behind me. Thorne turned his cold eyes on them. "Who the hell are you people?" But I didn't look away from him. I just squared my shoulders. "You're not taking her anywhere," I said. That's when the mask didn't just crack. It shattered. "You think you can stop me?" He snarled, and the polish was gone, replaced by something ugly and flat. "You're just the help," he spat. "A cleaning lady in a greasy apron. Go back to your mop, woman." And that was his mistake. That insult calling me just the help, he thought it would make me small. But all it did was remind me how many times in my life men like him had tried to erase me, to make me invisible. And I decided, not today. I ducked under the counter and grabbed the broom handle. Hardwood, solid as a rock. "Say what you want," I said, my knuckles white. "I ain't moving." He sneered at the broom, but he stopped. He was calculating the odds, and I could practically hear the gears turning in his head. A respected educator versus a low-paid server. He thought he'd win that court case easy. But then his eyes flared with pure, nasty fury. In one sudden, sickening motion, he yanked something from his belt. It wasn't a gun. It was a short, black riding crop. Thin, cruel, and sharp. Maya screamed behind me. I didn't think. I just lunged. I threw my body forward, arms wide, shielding the child. The crop lashed down with a sound like a rifle crack. Crack, it struck my shoulder hard. A white-hot agony flared across my back and shoulder blade, knocking the air right out of me. I grunted, my body twisting, but I didn't fall. I stayed upright. I didn't move an inch. The blood bloomed through the worn floral pattern of my blouse, slow and dark. "Soaking in. Shouldn't have done that," Thorne hissed. Panting now. damn sure shouldn't have touched a child, I spat back, the pain tightening my jaw. Behind me, the diner was suddenly quiet, but the air was screaming. I heard the scrape of boots. Grim, Tank, and Slick, they were on their feet. Dolores, who runs the counter with me, her hand was already on the phone. Thorne looked up and saw this wall of leather and steel closing in. He looked from my bloody shoulder to the faces of those men, all the pretense, all the respectability, it all just melted away. Grim stepped forward. Slow and deliberate, every inch of him pure consequence. "Put that thing down," he said, his voice a low, even rumble that didn't ask, it warned. Thorne tried to pull the school counselor mask back on. She attacked me. "I want the police called." "You raised your hand to a child," Grim replied, "and then struck a woman who stood between you and that child. We all saw it. That was when the real turning point happened. Maya, this 10-year-old who had been clinging and shaking, she peeked from behind me. Her face was pale, but her voice was steady. She looked Thorne right in the eye. "He's been watching me since my parents went out of town," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "And 3 weeks ago, my friend Chloe Reed disappeared. They said she moved away, but I saw her backpack. In his car, then she dropped the bomb. He dropped a key in class last week. I memorized it. It said Route 89. Unit C-14. Thorne's composure didn't just crack this time, it shattered completely. His face went gray. Maya's memory, that precise, terrified detail, it was more truth than he'd spoken all day. Dolores, her hand still holding the receiver, relayed the address. And when Detective Avery Hayes arrived, a woman whose eyes looked like she'd seen every shadow the world had to offer, she didn't waste time. She arrested Dr. Silas Thorne, right there. Based on the missing child report for Chloe and the bloody witness, I sat on a counter stool while the paramedics cleaned my wound, with Maya nestled right next to me. I wouldn't let them take me to the hospital yet. If I leave this child now, I told them, she might start thinking the world's gone cold again. Asterisk, less than an hour later. Detective Hayes returned, her expression grave, but her eyes holding a flicker of something, triumphant. "We found her," Hayes said softly. "We found Chloe. Chloe was alive, hidden away in that storage unit. But that wasn't the end. The police also found files, records, notes. The clean-cut, respectable Dr. Thorne wasn't just a monster. He was one gear in a much bigger, much uglier machine. They found evidence connecting him to a network that spanned 3 states, targeting kids under the guise of mentorship. 23 victims identified, and the investigation was just starting. For the first time in my life, being just the help had meant I was invisible to the people who mattered least, but visible to the people who mattered most. The days after felt like living in a whirlwind. Maya's parents flew back, hysterical, grateful, heartbroken. They kept trying to thank me, offer me money, but I shook my head. She saved herself, I always told them. I just stood in the way. Detective Hayes, she came back with a folder, not of charges, but of an offer a school aid position, with a direct recommendation from the district principal. I didn't ask for it, what she said was exactly why I deserved it. But even with the new job and the applause, I couldn't rest. I kept thinking about those files. Thorne was just the first domino. How deep did the network go? That's why I found myself on a Greyhound bus, heading to Emerald City, 3 states away. I was chasing a ghost, Leela Kay, a girl whose shaky cursive was in a notebook the police had found. She was one of the first victims years ago. She was the one who wrote, "If you're scared, find the loudest woman in the room. She'll either save you or become your enemy, but at least you'll be seen." I found Lila in a small, sparse apartment. She looked older than her 20 years. She told me the rest of the truth, how Thorne's network was organized, coordinated, using social workers and educators. The missing link wasn't a piece of paper. It was a secret she'd held for years. A flash drive stored on a public computer with voice memos from other girls. Some still missing, some found. I rode back to the Crossroads Grill with that drive tucked deep into my coat pocket. When I walked back into the diner, Grim and the guys were there. They didn't ask questions. They just poured me a coffee.
Well, Grim asked after I'd finished my mug. She's alive, I said, and she remembered everything. Names, dates, and the ultimate evidence. I slid the flash drive across the table. That's when Detective Hayes walked in, like she always did when the real trouble started. We drove straight to the courthouse. The state had called a major press conference. Federal agents, the DA, the whole circus. But none of them were the main speaker. It was me. I walked up to that swarm of microphones, my knees shaking, but my voice was rock steady. "My name is Eleanor Vance," I started. "I was a server, a janitor, a nobody in the background of your community, until one day a little girl ran to me and said, 'Ma'am, help me, he's coming.' And I said, 'Yes.' I told them everything about the network, the files, the children used as inventory, the years of silence. 'We now have names, evidence, testimonies,' I announced. And I'm standing here today to say no more silence, no more shadows, no more pretending that this doesn't happen in our schools, in our churches, in our neighborhoods." The applause that followed was electric, thunderous. In the crowd, I saw Maya, her parents, and the face of Chloe, finally safe. The next day, Maya came by with her parents. She pressed a framed crayon drawing into my hand. It was me, holding the broom like a sword, standing in front of her. At the bottom, in careful block letters, it read, "You didn't run. You stood." Later, when I was alone, Dolores came out of the kitchen and handed me a small wrapped gift. It was a metal nameplate, one usually reserved for the counter, but this one was etched deep. Eleanor Vance, lead server and iron backbone. I laughed, a real deep laugh that felt like healing. But the fight wasn't over. The flash drive was the map, but the road ahead was long. The network was huge. "They think we won't come for them," I told Grim and the guys that night, looking out at the dark road. "They don't think about us at all. We're the background, the help, the ones they pass by without seeing." Grim just nodded. Then maybe it's time they started looking over their shoulders. The next morning, the roar of engines wasn't leaving. It was waiting. I stepped out of the diner wearing an old, oil-stained leather jacket I'd borrowed from Dolores's husband. It smelled like old tobacco and felt like armor. Grim handed me a helmet. "You sure, Ellie?" he asked. I was never unsure. Not after that girl looked me in the eye and asked if I'd stand. I climbed onto the back of Tank's spare bike. The open road rolled out beneath us, a blur of gray lines leading towards forgotten towns, towards other shadows that needed to be chased into the light. The silence that once held fear now held resolute. We didn't know what came next, but we were ready. Because when you choose to stand up for one child, you find out you're riding for every single one of them. The row is heavy, but you're not carrying it alone anymore. What about you? Have you ever had a moment where you had to choose between being silent and standing in the gap? Where did you find your iron backbone? Tell me about a time when you were just the help, but chose to be the hero instead. Drop your thoughts below. Let's keep this conversation going.